Hi, this is Maryland Comptroller Peter Francho. I may not listen to every podcast out there, but I do listen to the Maryland Crabs.
Live from a grungy kitchen table located in Annapolis, Maryland's scenic and historic capital, it's the Maryland Crabs Podcast. With each episode, your hosts, Tim Hamilton, John Frenay, and the occasional guest will dive in and pick apart the stuff that really matters most to you. We're too lazy to actually solve any of these problems, but we can definitely stir the pot. From schools, politics, parking in the fire lane, to those horrible people who drive BMWs. And here with this week's episode, live from the kitchen table, Tim Hamilton and John Frenay.
It's the Maryland Crabs. You ditched me today.
I was listening to a podcast of Beautiful Anonymous, and the host was making fun of his guest because she always sang things. She's like a folk singer, and everything she sang.
Was it Joni Mitchell?
No, it wasn't Joni Mitchell, but it sounded like you because you just like had to sing that Maryland Crabs thing again.
And you ignored me. You ditched me today.
It's like a logo. No, I didn't. I'm right here.
We were supposed to meet at 1.
We were looking face to face.
1 p.m., and I'm sitting outside your house for like literally 40 minutes, and your neighbors are all staring at me.
Ironically.
So I zipped my pants up and then went home.
Ironically, I was in the yacht club, and even more ironically, they let me in.
That is ironic. Like rain on your wedding day. So we're here now, and I'm going to forgive you. But you didn't apologize. I want to note that.
That's fine.
I'm going to forgive you, but you never apologized.
Hey, I've done an intro on my own.
This isn't. What are you keeping score? This is. You know what? I take my apology back. I'm not sorry.
Yeah,
but you're not sorry.
Let's go. Get on to it. Hey, Dan Nataf, his episode was kind of cool. I enjoyed that conversation.
I could talk to him forever, and I know it annoys you when we talk national stuff, but I enjoy talking national stuff with him.
Great insight.
Roll your eyes whenever I.
Yeah, I did. Great insight. Just a really tight look at what people are thinking about. It's really fascinating how that whole study comes up. That biannual, semi-annual. I get it confused.
Semi.
What's the difference between that and bi?
Bi is that you date other surveys.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
So, you know what's interesting? I had a job about 20 years ago when I first moved here. I worked in TV news, and the job was data crunching in the radio industry. The job itself was a little tedious. Nothing against the people who were there. It was just, because you just sat in a cubicle and you crunched data all day. Mm-hmm. But one thing I did like that I found out that I do like data. I like being able to see patterns, just be able to say, something happens. Why did it happen? What else was going on? And when you talk to Dan, that's kind of what he does, is that they're looking for national trends, taking the emotion out of it, taking all the passion and the ideology out of it, and just looking at the data and saying, this is what people do and this is why they do it.
Yeah.
He's a very clear thinker. I wish I had that clarity of thought.
He really is. I'll go back to our debate. Good choice on our part to get him to moderate that.
Yeah, because he knew what he was doing. We were just faking it before that.
That's true. Elections are coming up, though.
Yep, we got, let's say...
It's getting dirty.
It is. All right, so, and people who are not in Annapolis, just know that we have 5 days left of this, and then you can stop sending us the nasty grams.
And we don't have an Annapolis-centric episode today, but you'll have to wait like 5 minutes before we tell you who we're talking to.
That's a teaser. So I think Ward's 5, which is Forest Drive, the midpoint of Forest Drive, and then Ward 8, which is Eastport.
James Appel and Mark Rodriguez.
Yeah, and then Julie Massag.
Julie Massag and Ross Arnett in Ward 8.
Yeah, those are the two to watch, and those, they're not getting nasty.
I think 7's going to be one to watch, too, between David Franklin and Rob Savage.
Yeah, they're really heating up because I think those are going to be close. I couldn't pick a winner. Well, I don't know, maybe Ward 5, but I mean, it's getting a little tense on Facebook. Like, you're watching it on Facebook and you're getting the little zingers. I think today you said, I saw the one from Gavin that said, we're not going to go nasty, unlike, Mike is doing right now. And,
from what I understand...
And I don't know if he's nasty, but...
From what I understand at the Democratic Unity Breakfast after the primary, that they did all agree that they were not going to go nasty at all. And it seems like all the Democrats are doing it. I know there's been some back and forth in Ward 5, and... the Democrats aren't swinging back.
Well, but you know what? I think there's a difference between going
back and forth in Ward 7, and the Democrats are not swinging back. Ward 8, I think they're swinging back.
But I don't think there's... Well, that's because there's a lot of proxy people. I mean, you have people that the candidates themselves and their campaigns may not be swinging, but there's people on their behalf.
Sure.
And I'm not saying that it's coordinated, but I'm just saying it is occurring. But I think there's a difference between going nasty and I think there's some legitimate things you can... I mean, like... The Ferris wheel, I think, was in bounds. I don't think it was nasty per se. I think you just try and make hay whenever you can. You're trying to find issues and you're trying to put them out there. I think that maybe 5 may be borderline when you're talking about nasty.
Right.
But I think there's a difference between going nasty and defending yourself. I mean, I think if someone comes at you, I'm not saying that you go at the throat, but you can say, hey, this is why they're wrong, or this is they're mischaracterizing my record or whatever. I think that's in bounds. I haven't seen anything yet that's made me kind of clutch my pearls and go, oh my God, that was way over the line. Right. It's been fairly calm. There have been some things that are just questionable. I mean, and I wouldn't say it was clean. And it's funny there. Gavin Buckley posted onto his Facebook page about a lunch he had with Mike Panelides in early September and how they agreed to be clean and not run a clean campaign and not, just stick to the issues and not go everything else. And I'm like, yeah, but that was before the primary. When Mike thought he was going to be running against John Astle. But well, I think that it's going to be a close race, mayoral. I don't think it's going to be a runaway. I don't think it's going to be as close as last time, but I think it's still going to be close. You know what? I want to break a little bit here and just put a shout out to Scott McMullen. And just tell him, don't bother texting me. My choices have not changed from when I. Yeah, he texts you pretty regularly. It's funny. Every week it's like, hey, so did your opinion change? Well, if any bombs are going to come, they're going to come this week, right, or over the weekend, because this is going to be your November surprise. I guess it's October. Yeah, it should. November. It should. We've got about 5 more days, and we get little emails and messages from people kind of saying, hey, have you heard like that? I think they want us to talk about it. And this right here. Yeah. We just went over something. One of you candidates, expect a phone call from me soon. Yeah. We need to talk. John got some info, but I'm not a journalist, so it's not my job to vet this stuff. I'm just a podcaster. Yeah. For those that are interested, now this is my opinion of who is going to win, not who I want to win, who I would vote for, and everything like that. I don't do predictions because I like people to like me. So you go ahead with your prediction. Well, this is a prediction. It's not an endorsement. So that's just sort of a. Maybe it's not, they won't hate me. They just won't not like me. But I think Ellie Tierney is going to win in Ward 1. I think Larry Clausen is running kind of a very weak campaign so far, despite Ellie's problems with her shoplifting revelations and everything else there. Ward 2 is going to be real tight, but I think Kurt Riegel is going to take that from Fred Payon. Ward 3 is Rhonda Pindell-Charles. Ward 4, I had picked Sheila Finlayson to win the primary, which she did. But she should go right into her seat, but there is Cynthia Carter is managing a write-in campaign for the losing primary candidate, Tony Pratt. And I think I would not be surprised now. That one I may change, that Tony may win that, but I didn't see her coming in as a write-in. Ward 5, I think Mark Rodriguez will get that by a fairly significant margin. Not a huge margin, but a significant one. Ward 6, we already know that's Shanika Henson. Ward 7, I think, will be David Frankel. Do you really? Yeah, I do. I still think that Rob Savage is just so centric and so focused on the environment, and there's other things that need to be worried about in the ward as well as in the city as well. So I think David Frankel may come back. I think he's very more broadly qualified for it, and just his experience and so forth. Although I do believe that we should have more young people on the council as opposed to, I mean, if we have a whole bunch of retired, old fuddy-duddies on the council, that doesn't do us any good. Only fuddy-duddies use the word fuddy-duddies. Yeah, that's right. I can. I got gray hair and glasses. Good God. And Ward 8, I think Julie Mussog will eke out a win over Ross Arnett. And that's getting a little bit dirty. And they are, again, both equally qualified. I think people are just tired of an 11-year-old alderman, and looking for change. And I think that's something that you see in the whole city, that people are looking for change. And we talked a little bit before we started, and I think that people want change, but they're not quite sure what change they want. So I was talking to Jared the other day, the giddy outgoing alderman who's getting his life back. That's the one with the senioritis, right? Yeah. But he was funny because he was talking about his wife. Did he have any F's left to give? He's talking about the election and everything like that. And she said, I think that you and your circle and a certain amount of people here who are obsessed with local politics think that everyone in town is obsessed with local politics, and most people aren't. So I think you and I talk about this constantly. Oh my God. And the people, our friends constantly. Marlene is so right. And the people who listen to our podcast are super plugged into this. But if we talk to, I think, the average person on the street, they don't even know what ward they're in, let alone who's running. Maybe that's what we'll do next week. We'll go out on the street and ask people, hey, what ward do you live in? That would be fun, right? Gets me out of the house, gets us to do something. We got out of the house this week. Or last week, rather. Yeah. We went up to Baltimore. We did. Oh, I didn't mention my mayor's race. I think Gavin Buckley is going to eke it out by a little bit, by less than the number of votes that it took Mike Panelides to win over Josh Cohen. So you think it's going to be that close? I think you're going to see that race come down to less than 100 votes. I wouldn't be surprised if it was less than the 59 that Mike had to win it. Well, the rec center is closed. Oh, we'll go to the new rec center. We'll go to Pitt Moyer for the count. I don't know. Because remember last year we went to I say we go to Puster's as much, make it a little bit easier, but.
But yeah, no, and you were saying that we did get out of the house last
we went
week.
to Baltimore. We did a road trip because all the people were complaining that we're so Annapolis-centric, and you're right. So we on the road, and we went up to see the Baltimore Police Commissioner, Kevin Davis, who was awesome.
That's right. I mean, we had to bang on the door and scream and yell and
getting in was tough.
Chain ourselves to the front door before he could see us, but that was...
But it was funny because we sat down to talk, and he went to DeMatha, and he brought it up. I think he called it the Irish Catholic High School Mafia. He said, because I said I went to good counsel, he went to DeMatha, and Gonzaga, our governor, our lieutenant governor O'Malley, but everyone who's in high end elected official went to some Catholic school in Central Maryland in D.C. Right. So we were talking about that. It was funny.
Well, Kevin Davis is great. I mean, I knew him from his time here in Anne Arundel County.
And he's over at PG County.
Chief of Police.
And I talked to a couple of cops who were my friends, and I just mentioned we saw him, and they both were thrilled. They love him. So he seems to be like kind of a cop's cop.
Maybe we have new listeners.
That's when he's the cops listening.
Yeah. Hey, if you are listening, give us a rating. Go ahead, do it. You know you want to do it. 5 stars. And when we were up there, our house.
Yes.
In the middle of a street.
Stop.
Our house.
We went to our house, which is like there. It's not a market house, but it was very similar to our market house. It's kind of that open sort of, structured building where you have the chairs in the middle and then you have the vendors all on the sides. And I think you were telling me it's kind of like an incubator.
Yeah, it's sort of a restaurant incubator type thing. It's up near Hopkins, Druid Hill Park, that area.
Yeah, so it was
right off of 83, very convenient. And
it's what I want our market house to be.
Yeah, I mean, there's offices upstairs of the building. There's other businesses there, but the lower third half of this industrial building is this. I don't want to say a food court because it's not, but they've got that Korean barbecue, really cool pizza. They had a
Mediterranean.
They had a true pop-up shop. They had a sushi shop. They had a salad place. Tacos. There was probably
ice cream.
Yeah. There was probably about 15 to 20 different restaurants.
Yeah, about 12 around there. So they had room for other ones, but from what I understand, they go in there for a while and they get their feet wet and they understand, the mechanics of running a business, and then they graduate and they're out. Right?
Yeah.
But it was amazing. A little pricey, but not obscene.
There are a couple ways that you can go in there, from what I understand, is that you can go in as if you've got a business plan and everything else, you want to sit there and run this thing for a year or two. You've got essentially what would be called a semi-permanent place. But they do have the place where I got my croque madame.
And your fries with the
was a true pop-up shop. And this is this was an opera, some arts organization in Baltimore came and they staffed it for presumably the month or 2 months or whatever it is, and they devised the menu and they gave them the kitchen, and it was a true pop-up store, which is a restaurant, which is really cool. The place where you could dine, I mean, it was industrial. You could roll up the garage door windows so in nice weather it could be very open. The table I thought was designed real well because it was sort of like a step table. We sat at a table height thing. The table right attached and next to us was bar height.
Right.
And the one next to us on the other side was little kid height. And your jacket's still hanging on the back of the chair.
Yeah, I left my coat there, but it was also my wife figured out she was pissed until she figured out which one it was. And she's like, I've been trying to get rid of that for years. So she's pretty happy. But I got the pizza. I got New Haven style pizza. And I got 2 slices and a drink. And I think it was like $12. And
yeah,
so a little pricey, but not obscene. But it was really good. And that's what I want our market house to be. There's no reason our market house couldn't be that same thing.
Yeah, real funky things. I mean, I think I said to you earlier this morning that, I can go to Jimmy John's for $7 and get something to eat, but I would much rather spend the $12 to go to the Our House and get
I didn't correct you,
better.
But if you go to Jimmy John's down here and you get a sandwich and a drink and chips, you're running like $11.
Is it?
Yeah. It's a little pricey.
Yeah. So it really good. If you're up in Baltimore, check it out. It's the letter R. House. And shout out to Peter Francho for turning us on to that, because we were talking a little bit about Annapolis Market House, and he said, why couldn't it be like that? And we're like, we don't know what the hell that is.
Now I see what he's talking about. He's dead on. I mean, we could be that. I mean, I think it's perfectly reasonable to expect that the city could pull that off, kind of hands off. And
it is. And I mean, it is a food courtish type thing.
Yeah, but not.
But it's not your typical food
not
court.
Like Chesapeake House or Maryland House.
It's not. You don't have a Chick-fil-A in there. You don't have a Taco Bell or Sbarro or anything like that. I mean,
Sbarro, which are ridiculously priced pizza anyway. That's bad.
And we also, when we were up in Baltimore, we checked out the Baltimore City Police Department Museum.
That was all. We went there. Well, we didn't check it out. We went there by accident. And
then we checked it out afterwards.
Then we checked it afterwards. We went back after we talked to. So you can tell the commissioner's telling us to go check it out. We're like, oh, we will. We actually did. We went downstairs and we went in and we got some pictures.
Pretty fascinating.
We'll post those pictures. But it was really cool. And his office was really cool. I mean, his office, he had all those sort of antiques and the same sort of things. He had the call boxes and he had the old uniform. So, I mean, we could have spent a while in his office. And actually, he gave us a lot more time than I thought he was. He was really generous with his time.
Yeah.
But his office was really cool. The view was great. It was huge. And he had all this stuff in there that was really cool to look at. And we got our coins. Yeah. So, sort of like Peter French show. So now I'm expecting this from everyone.
That's right. If you're ever a guest on this podcast, come up with a coin.
You better have some sort of coin.
That's right.
So anyway, it was great talking to him, and he was very generous with his time, and he kind of got it. So
let's get into it.
Yep.
Here's Baltimore City Police Commissioner Kevin Davis.
Hi, this is Anne Arundel County Executive Steve Shue. We're battling a heroin epidemic that we can't fight alone. Talk to your kids about the danger of drugs today. The road to heroin abuse often starts with a prescription from a doctor. Don't be silent about this problem. Talk to your children. Ask your doctor to provide only the minimum number of pills necessary. Go to denialisdeadly.org right now for the tools you need to stop heroin addiction before it starts.
When a ring from the United States Naval Academy comes into Zachary's for a center stone, it always makes us wonder, where's this one going? Where's this one been? A nuclear sub in the North Atlantic? A carrier deck in the South Pacific? The moon? 52 astronauts are Academy graduates, from Iwo Jima to Okinawa, Corregidor to the Coral Sea, Midway to the Persian Gulf, Congress to the White House. These rings go where America goes. 73 that went to war were awarded the Medal of Honor. But wherever they go, wherever they may serve, our admiration goes with them.
Zachary's. Online at zacharysjewelers.com. More than a jewelry store, a jeweler.
Well, we are here on the, what are we on, the 6th floor? 7th?
Fifth
floor of a high-rise in Baltimore with Commissioner Kevin Davis, the police commissioner for Baltimore City Police Department. How are you today?
Thanks for having me on, John. Long time no see.
Hey, thank you for inviting me here. This is great.
Welcome.
There's no shackles, there's no handcuffs or anything like that.
Nothing. And out the window, you see what's the remaining shot tower in Baltimore. There used to be 3. And for about 20 years back in the 1800s, that was the tallest building in America. So
really?
Yeah. So I get to look out my window and see that every day. Built without scaffolding.
So my back is to the window for a reason, because I'm prone to distractions.
That's right.
So when John set us up, I'm looking into all the cool stuff you have here. Yeah. Is that an old call box over there?
Old call box, yeah.
That's really cool.
That call box sat in Richmond, Virginia, on a street corner for 50-some years. And there's a retired D.C. police officer who refurbishes those and sells them, and I somehow got my hands on one of them.
Well, we came in the wrong door when we first came to visit. We went into
the museum.
Oh, did you see the museum?
I could have been. Yeah. I mean, he had to pull me out. That was
we just
crazy.
did that. So one of the things, this police department's been here for 234 years. Since 1784.
Where does that rank as far as police forces in
it's
the country?
Probably East Coast, big city. When you look at Boston, Philly, Baltimore, D.C., I don't know which one came first, but it's a big city.
Yeah.
Police department, East Coast, a lot of pride, a lot of tradition, meaningful to the community in different ways. And we didn't have a museum. And apparently one used to exist in Baltimore, and it kind of went by the wayside back in the 90s. So one of the things that people brought to my attention when I first got here a few years ago was that we're one of the oldest, biggest police departments in the country. We need that connection to our history. So we started this internal effort to build this museum literally from scratch. And we reached out to retirees and their families. And most of what you see down there is on loan, so to speak, back to us from families of retired and now deceased Baltimore police officers.
When did that open?
We had a grand opening probably 3 months or 4 months ago.
It's incredible.
So this is a real recent effort.
Yeah. I now fancy myself as a part-time museum curator. But it's open every Friday from 10 to 2, I think, banker's hours. And we've had some elementary school kids come through on a quick field trip. And we're not done. We're going to attach a classroom to it, and we're going to show films that kind of speak to the history of policing in Baltimore.
I mean, it's packed with cool stuff. I mean, it's just not the photographs, but I mean, they have a full bomb squad tech suit in there,
and
it looks
like the old
there's an old
the lineup. Do you see the lineup area where
I've seen my share of lineups.
But another thing about Baltimore, many things are unique because we're a city of firsts. Is we have the oldest still in service mounted unit, police mounted unit in the country. Since 1888, police officers in Baltimore have been on horseback. And to this day, we still have half a dozen or so police officers who exclusively ride horses.
Did you see in Dubai? It was on the internet last week. In Dubai, they now have these like hovercrafts for like motorcycles, but they hover for the police.
Oh yeah.
It says there's a propeller on either side of it. So the police get on there and it's like sky motorcycles. It's crazy.
Huh.
George Jetson comes to policing.
Right. That's right. I know. All the technologies.
Sure. Yeah. You know, it's funny. I was talking to Tim on the way up here that you got your, I don't want to say start. Did you get your start in PG?
Yeah, I retired. Born and raised in Prince George's County. I'm fourth generation public safety. My father is a retired Prince George's County police officer, so I grew up as a son of a cop. And I spent 21 years in Prince George's County and retired as the number 2, the assistant chief in charge of that organization. As I retired, I think I retired on a Thursday, and on a Friday, I became police chief in Anne Arundel County.
Right. And then on Saturday, you had that little accident.
Yeah. I was rear-ended by someone under the influence of narcotics. Yeah.
And it's funny, you say Prince George's County, and we got reprimanded when we were talking to Rashawn Baker.
John did.
Because it was,
well,
don't go with the PG. It's Prince George's County.
Here's how I feel about PG versus Prince George's. I certainly understand the sentiment behind the movement to only refer to Prince George's County as Prince George's County. But being born and raised there inside the Beltway, I think us lifers reserve the right to occasionally call it PG County as well. So I do a little bit of both.
You're just saving a couple syllables there. But
my sister's Mary Beth. They call her MB. It saves me a lot of time.
That's right.
You moved into Anne Arundel County as the chief, and that was an appointment by the county executive at the time, Laura Newman. Lost her re-election campaign.
Primary, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I still stay in touch with Laura Newman. She moved to Baltimore County.
Right.
I joke with Laura all the time. I would not be surprised at all if we don't see Laura Newman in some way, shape, or form in elected office again.
Okay.
I don't know what it'll be, but it's going to be something.
All right. Now, this is very interesting because Laura Newman and I had brunch at the Ram's Head one time, and she said if she lost this election, she would never run again. And I said, oh, that's BS. And she said, no, absolutely not. She swore up and down. I said,
did you bet her?
Yes, we did. And she owes me a lunch if she does. So now I've got another connection to her if she tries to avoid
She's going to be buying you lunch. And she was, never served in an elected capacity before. And the dedication and here's Laura Newman in a nutshell. Ask out loud, why do we do it that way? And in government, us lifers typically don't like to be challenged as to why we do things a certain way, because the answer is all too often, well, that's the way we've always done it. So I really enjoyed working for Laura Newman, and she looked at several things from technology to other practices within the police department and elsewhere in government. And she would routinely ask, why do we do it that way? And oftentimes it made people think about better ways to do things, to run a government.
Well, it's funny. I was telling Captain Jackson on the way up here that during your tenure at Anne Arundel County, you really brought public disclosure, if you will, and transparency to the department. You were the cleanup guy in Anne Arundel County.
Yeah.
We had some issues. We had some temporary things. And
some people may refer to me as the cleanup guy in Baltimore as well.
Yeah, well, I was going to go there too a little bit later. But
we were talking before that when you're new somewhere, and you look at something with new eyes and say, why are we doing it this way? And this is the way we've always done it. Right. Is that brings up often a lot of positive changes, but it also can rankle the people who have been doing it that way.
Absolutely, especially in our profession, our policing profession, and I've been in it my whole adult life, so I think I've earned the right to be critical of my own profession from time to time. We unnecessarily, as a profession, avoid transparency when transparency absolutely can help us build a better relationship with the community and fight crime more effectively. Mm-hmm. And we don't know why we cling to those traditional especially when it comes to the media. Why don't we tell the media what's going on? Why don't we share with the community our challenges? Why don't we release that video, that body-worn camera video? Why don't we do that? So one of the people I became closest with in Anne Arundel County, and I did enjoy my couple years there, was TJ Smith. And one of the first decisions I made was to reach out to TJ when I became the police commissioner in Baltimore. And I worked something out with Steve Shue, the county executive, and Tim Altamari, the police chief down there, to get TJ up to Baltimore. Because I absolutely knew then and know now that I can't do this job without someone like TJ. Born and raised in Baltimore, his mother and his wife are actually still Baltimore City public school teachers.
Sure, and certainly I think the commute to Anne Arundel County was a little bit of a pressure on TJ as well. And TJ's great. I mean, he's the one that ran your communications division, I guess. And
there's nobody better.
You know, he was first on Twitter and first on Facebook to get it out there, and he was accessible. He was. And, you know, when he did come up here, we were all going, that son of a bitch, Davis, how come you know?
I got him. I got him. So that will be, and I've shared this with TJ, you know, how TJ landed here in Baltimore will be a chapter in my book one day, because it took some effort and it paid off. And he speaks directly to the people, you know, no frills, no BS. And you know, one of the reasons why we routinely, actually not routinely, always release body-worn camera footage anytime a police officer is involved in a police-involved shooting is because of our commitment to transparency.
Well, we were talking about that when we were coming in today about transparency, or not transparency per se, but we were saying, you know, that the police departments universally are under more scrutiny than maybe any other profession.
Absolutely.
We were saying, you know, rightfully so, because they have an enormous amount of power over the citizenry, you know, to deprive you of your freedom or, you know, temporarily, and they have a large impact on your day-to-day life. So I guess the trade-off is that, you know, there's going to be more scrutiny than you would with any other public servant. However, you know, if I'm a police officer, then, you know, I do feel defensive about that from time to time, because we were also saying that you make a split-second decision that you can look at the body camera footage, or you can look at a situation, what happened, and you don't take into account the fact that that officer had 1.5 seconds to make a decision that maybe his life depended on that decision. Usually it's the right decision. Sometimes it's not, but you never take that into account. But the transparency is important, because then if you're not, it looks like you're holding back, and with scrutiny. Yeah,
if the only time we communicate with the media or the community is when we're in a defensive posture, we're going to lose each and every time. So if we're routinely transparent, if we routinely open ourselves up to criticism, then when we need to go to our bank account of goodwill will be in our bank account. And when we need the benefit of the doubt in the community will say, you know what? This is how I feel about the police department generally. So if I need to afford them some level of benefit of the doubt, they're more than likely to do it if you're routinely transparent and open with them. And still, even to this day, and I think particularly big city police chiefs get it. Some of the smaller police chiefs, mid-size, don't yet get it, even though I think they're trying their best to figure it out. But you should apologize early and often. Right?
I based my marriage on that.
If you make a mistake, apologize early and often. You know, acknowledge shortcomings, commit to better training, commit to better practices. And once you do that and you're genuine and you're sincere about it, I think communities start to feel better about their police department.
I think your industry or your profession in general is a very difficult one, because aside from this meeting today, probably every one of my interactions with a cop has been on a negative tone, whether it be somebody that broke into my house, whether I was zipping down the highway and I got pulled over,
your bike,
or something along those lines. And Baltimore has come a long way, and certainly there's more room to go to bring that trust back in. That you know the police are not the bad guys. I mean, obviously they're there to uphold laws and enforce laws and take care of the bad guys. But what initiatives is Baltimore City taking to sort of curtail that?
There's a lot, John, and I'll talk about a couple. But first, I'll say that most interactions that people have with police officers are when they are in a crisis, a personal crisis, a family crisis, a neighborhood crisis. There could be a crime that just occurred. So most interactions between police officers and citizens, there is a level of a crisis going on. Even a traffic stop.
They're not pulling me over to tell me what an awesome job I did in front of that guy.
It's a miniature crisis to you, because you're on the receiving end of a traffic stop. And then our authority in America, and you alluded to it earlier, we're the only profession that can detain you, that can charge you with a crime, and we're the only profession that can, with justification, take your life. We can use deadly force. So we are a different profession, and we deserve the scrutiny that our profession is getting. And I don't shy away from it, and I don't run from it, and I embrace it. So a few things that we're doing specifically, John, in terms of building trust. Every police academy class that has graduated, and we just graduated our most recent class last night, they spend their first 3 to 4 months exclusively walking foot patrol in Baltimore. They do not get inside of a police car. They walk foot patrol in various neighborhoods and communities throughout the city. And the biggest reason I do that is so they learn how to communicate with people who aren't under arrest, people who aren't reporting a crime, people who aren't a witness to a crime. And it's really served us very, very, very well.
And that's the definition of like community policing, if you will, right?
Yeah.
Or part of
everyone has their own definition, but
the community policing is kind of interesting to me because when we first started talking about this in Annapolis with the chief priest at the time, so you put two guys like us who are going to solve all the world's problems with no experience, and you say, "What's the solution to this?" And we'll say, "Oh, it's community policing." You get them on the streets, and Chief Pristoop very patiently explained to us, going, there is aspects of community policing that are very important, but there's also practicality to that. It's mobility of the police officers to areas where they have to, you have a limited number of officers who are on the street at any given time, and they have to be mobile. I mean,
they can't all walk foot patrol.
Exactly. Right. So I think that is the canard that if you ask anybody who with no experience, what is the solution to crime? The first thing they're always going to say is community policing, but that's a very broad blanket.
It's very broad. It's misused.
Exactly. And we were misusing it too. It wasn't until all these interviews that we're suddenly like, okay, it's not the panacea.
And approachability is a big thing with me. So if a police officer is approachable, he or she has an approachable demeanor, he or she is likely to initiate a conversation with someone who's not under arrest or not suspected of committing a crime. That approachability goes a long, long way. So I look for commanders, particularly commanders, to be approachable. Would you want your loved ones to have an interaction with this police officer? And if the answer is yes, more than likely that police officer possesses an approachable demeanor.
It's funny, we're talking about why you become a police officer, and people do it for various reasons. Like, I grew up Irish Catholic. We grew up in a similar area. Yeah. So how many cops do we know that are our family or friends? And I have those that are, my brother-in-law is a Capitol Police officer, and you would never know that he doesn't have that like air of authority. He's very quiet, very calm. You'd never know that he's a police officer. And then I have my friends I grew up with that, I come back 10 years later, they're like, they're a cop. I'm like, yeah, of course they are. Why wouldn't they be? Because, they all have the different styles. But, I think people become police officers for different reasons. Yeah. And that approachability that you talk about, some of my friends, I'm like, you weren't approachable in high school, let alone as a police officer.
Right. And those types of personalities, we have to be careful on who we recruit and who we select to be police officers. I think the police officers who end up getting in trouble and misusing their authority, and getting fired or criminally charged or otherwise bringing embarrassment to their agency possess a level of narcissism. So, as we identify narcissistic personality traits, I don't want narcissistic police clinically. And that's why it's so important to do a really thorough background investigation to include a psychological evaluation. Those persons who possess narcissistic personality traits, they need to go do something else. This job isn't for everyone, and you need to have empathy to be a police officer, and we need to find better ways as a profession to measure. Now, this is easier said than done. How do I measure someone's capacity for empathy or humanism? It's a lot easier to measure how many push-ups or sit-ups you can do and test your eyesight and see if you have a clean driving record. Yeah. That's really a definitive thing. Yes, no. But we're really trying to do things differently in terms of our selection process.
But we talk about like hiring the people, though. Baltimore has a reputation, somewhat deservedly, of having some overzealous officers. And I mean, we've had some arrests and everything else. With good hires, with hiring cops with empathy and everything else coming on now, is this just a period that, I mean, obviously the bad cops have to leave.
Yes.
Whether they retire, they get away with it and retire, or whether they're caught or removed or whatever. I understand it's not the easiest thing to fire a cop with a union in the city and the government and everything else. But do you think that, let's fast forward till we're all dead here 40 years from now or something like that we're going to have a much more empathetic...
But that doesn't exist in a vacuum, because I would say that when you call it overzealous, when you have someone who's aggressive in conducting their duties, is it because that you're in an area where you have to make split-second decisions and you don't face those as a police officer in, say, Salisbury or even Ocean City? Where
I mean, police officers are exposed to trauma. And John, I was adding 40 years to my age right now. Like, man, I don't know if I'll be alive then. But police officers are exposed to trauma.
My friend he was the first responder. He's a Capitol. He works Capitol Police Department. He was the first responder at the Navy Yard shooting. Right. And that affected him greatly.
But there are police officers in Baltimore who respond to shootings every day.
Right.
Every day. Yeah. So in a jurisdiction that's challenged by violent crime, and there are a handful of big cities that are challenged by violent crime like we are, Detroit, Chicago, Philly. There aren't many places like Baltimore. So the level of violence that police officers in Baltimore are exposed to are far, far greater than any of the surrounding jurisdictions added up together. So we recently, for the first time ever, hired 2 organizational psychologists that now work under the umbrella of the police department. And we've really gotten our early identification system off the ground, so we can identify police officers who are exposed to the stressors of the occupation,
PTSD, and the
stressors of life. And
is it hard to get type A people, like men and women? I mean, you figure that they're in command positions because they're police officers, because they have to take command of a situation. Is it hard to get those people to see a counselor or a psychologist?
No. So it's the way forward is you mandate it. So there are certain things that if it happens to a police officer during the course of his or her duty, a police involved shooting, a real critical use of force incident, or anything else that I or the commanders deem as significant, we mandate. So that way you take away the stigma of someone putting his hand in the air.
So that's the paperwork needs to be filled out. You're on desk duty and you need to see a psychiatrist or a psychologist.
Or you can remain on full duty and see
which takes the pressure off them, because
absolutely.
So it's not a sign of weakness. I have to do it.
This profession is filled with a lot of really, like you said, type A stoic personalities. And, police officers, probably disproportionate to other professions, have medicated themselves with alcohol. And then you see police officers, in terms of substance abuse and domestic violence, accelerated rate of divorce from their spouses.
We were talking to the officer at the front desk when we came up. She was fascinating. She was just absolutely charming too. But she's been a police officer in New York and D.C. and here. But I was saying I worked in TV news for years in the Southwest, so it wasn't that rough of a city. But we worked the same hours as the police officers. We saw a lot of the same stuff that you're covering, and you got to know the police officers. And those patterns in news are the same, like just the alcohol and the self-medication.
Yeah, there's a few professions. People in your profession are exposed to the folks who are in crisis. Our profession's exposed to it. EMS, ER rooms, lawyers, prosecutors, defense attorneys.
Dentists. Wasn't that the old thing that they said the suicide rate among dentists was the highest?
I know. They always say that. I can't quite figure that out, but I'll read up on that.
I've never gone, yes, dentist appointment tomorrow.
There was a story just the other day about the fire chief down in Florida, I can't remember, Indian County, I think, that the pressure had gotten to him and seeing so much, and it was primarily, I think, to the drug thing. And he had written a Facebook update saying, you, my brothers, you need to really look out for this and do this, because at some point it's not going to, and he was really alluding, and he went out into the woods and ended up killing himself.
I've been to a handful of police suicide funerals since I've been the police commissioner in Baltimore. I experienced a couple in Prince George's as well. So we had 0 police chaplains before the riots of 2015. We now have 134 police chaplains. Wow. So one of the things that we really focused on immediately after the riots was we need to stand up a group of police chaplains so they can be our ambassadors in the community, because we knew we were facing months and months and months ahead of us of criminal trials and protests. And this is an activist community. So, one of the best things we've done in hindsight was stand up a police chaplains program. They get trained, they get certified. We give them police chaplain shirts and jackets to wear, and we use them all the time. And we use them for our own police officers too.
Now, just for the people that are listening, the riots were in
April and May of 2015.
You had already been here as the deputy commissioner,
for
correct?
a couple months. I just got here.
Okay, so you were here for the riots.
Yes,
okay,
I was.
And then Commissioner Batts was let go in the aftermath of that in July or something like that.
July the 8th. So I spent my whole career in Prince George's and retired as the number 2 and was the police chief in Anne Arundel until my boss lost her election. So I was suddenly a free agent. And Tony Batts and I were friends, and we had traveled to Bogota together with the DEA and really got to know each other pretty well because the 2 jurisdictions butt up against each other. And he asked me if I wanted to come to Baltimore. I said, I don't know. I'm kind of looking around. And I said, listen, I'll come to Baltimore for 1 year while I get my feet on the ground and decide what I want to do with the rest of my life. And then the riots, the unrest hit, and it happens in these jobs. He was suddenly out and I was suddenly in. So it was July 8th of 2015.
And as commissioner, I mean, you're working at the winds of politics.
Sure.
I mean, that's got to be a hell of a.
Yeah. Well, you have to know it, and you have to accept the fact that every day could be your last day, and you have to accept the fact that there could be something happening out there, and I'm pointing out my windows right now, that could end my career, that I don't necessarily have anything to personally do with, and that's just the reality of it all. And serving as a police chief in a big city, particularly in Baltimore, is like riding an electronic bull. and you're all by yourself on the electronic bull, and you're surrounded by a circle of people. And that circle of people include onlookers, supporters, naysayers, activists, politicians, media. They're all part of that circle that knows that eventually that electronic bull is going to throw you off. So I accept that and I embrace it, and I consider it a challenge. I don't go to bed at night or wake up in the morning worried about whether or not I'm going to be the police commissioner the next day. I just try to do my best.
Well, because you don't have any control over not just the event, but the perception of the event. So if you look at the riots, for example, like if you said, in the aftermath, you came to me and said, Tim, this, how would you have handled it? I said, well, I would have done this and this. And
of course.
Everyone does that.
Yeah.
But, again, you have to make decisions in the moment. And no matter what the decision was, you're going to be criticized no matter what. And that's the political part of this.
And you look at these events that take place across the country that get a lot of national attention, whether it's an active shooter in Las Vegas or the incident down in Dallas. I think you see leadership tested at those moments. And the best leadership that I've observed over my career is leadership that's not defensive, leadership that is genuine. And I think police chiefs get that right more than they get it wrong. But there are things that happen beyond your control. You can control your own effort. You can control, your personal integrity. And then you just hope to surround yourself with other leaders that help you get the job done.
I just think about the shakeup. I think when you and I were in college, and John was probably in your 50s or 60s, when it was the riots in South Central. Yeah. Which is probably the biggest.
92.
Yeah. So that was for me. I just remember watching it on CNN at the time, just watching an entire city on fire.
Yeah. I became a police officer in 1992.
Yeah. But the shakeup after that was massive.
Well,
Gil Garcetti and
it takes time. So there's a lot of impatient folks. They'll never admit they're impatient, but they're impatient. And they look at how humans artificially mark time with calendars, with years and months and weeks and days. And they say it's almost 2018. Why hasn't crime, for example, returned to a level of quote unquote normalcy? Because violent crime skyrocketed after the riots, and the absolute direct correlation to the riots 2015. So the riots are over.
In those specific areas, though, right?
Citywide. Okay. Citywide. So why hasn't violent crime normed? Well, most big cities in the country, with a few exceptions, D.C., New York, are struggling with violent crime right now. And this is probably another podcast, but I look at the cities in America that are getting policing right, and it took them years to recover from a critical incident like L.A. in 92. It takes years to really fundamentally improve any large organization.
Well, one would argue that in D.C., we grew up in the D.C. area, but
D.C. is a great police department.
Yeah, but remember, like the 80s, it was a war zone, and that was still the remnants of the riots in the 60s.
And D.C. went through with Chuck Ramsey, and Anthony Williams took over as mayor after Marion Barry, and Anthony Williams hired Chuck Ramsey. And Chuck Ramsey was a police commissioner in D.C. for 8 years, and he was given the time that he needed to rebuild that organization. And D.C. is one of the best police departments in the country. Prince George's County, awful reputation in the 70s and 80s for heavy-handedness. Absolutely one of the most fantastic professional agencies in the country. But both those agencies went through, in D.C., a memorandum of agreement with the Department of Justice, and in Prince George's, a consent decree. So now here we are in Baltimore. We have a consent decree, and it's a very familiar thing to me because I lived through it in Prince George's, and we will emerge as a better police department because of it.
Can you explain the consent decree to me for a second? Because I understand that that's based on the police reforms, but the DOJ backed off from that.
So we negotiated our consent decree during the presidential transition.
Right.
So a week before the current presidential administration took office, we're negotiating with the outgoing administration because we wanted a consent decree. So consent decrees do this. They mandate progress and change. So it is no longer up to the political whims of elected officials and people who control the purse strings of a budget on whether or not a jurisdiction should invest in public safety. So the way a consent decree works, it's overseen by a federal judge. It's a court order. And it mandates improvements in training and technology and best practices and staffing. So very selfishly, I'm excited about this consent decree process because I won't have to wish for those things to maybe occur one day when maybe our budget can afford all those technological advances and other things that make us better. A federal judge and a monitoring team is going to make sure that those things occur at a more rapid pace.
It reminds me of what we were just talking about with the officers being required to sit with psychologists and talk to the psychologists. Yeah. Is that when you mandate it?
That's part of it. Yeah, and we've already changed that.
But I mean, now you're, as an organization, you're mandated to do this, and it takes the pressure off you to...
It takes the pressure off the police officer, that stigma. Yeah, so a lot of things, training, technology. Our detectives in Baltimore still manage their investigative cases by using Lotus Notes.
Are you kidding me?
We're the only agency in America keeping them in business. We're about a couple weeks away from
I'm looking at the crime stats, and there's a little note based on Lotus Notes data.
There it is. Lotus Notes.
I thought that was a typo.
I had and I tell the mayor this all the time, and the mayor's been a big supporter. I had my first mobile data computer inside my police car in Prince George's County in 1998. 98. Cops in Baltimore don't have that. And that helps them do their job more efficiently. And the cops in Baltimore are millennials. So the average age of a police officer in patrol in Baltimore is about 26 and a half. So they're millennials. They want technology. They're smarter than our generations. Generation X, baby boomer, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, but the
greatest generation.
Look, I want a good parking spot out front, okay?
but these millennial cops are absolutely smarter. They're more empathetic, absolutely. They're more IT savvy. But one thing on the negative side, they're very thin-skinned, and they will think about changing professions a lot more often than we would think about.
Which is, and I hate making generational stereotypical,
doesn't apply to everyone.
Yeah, but that said, is just by utility, millennials are seen as a disposable workforce, so they don't have that dedication to an organization generally. I mean, again, we're making stereotypical judgment, but I mean that's a challenge across all industries when it comes to the millennials.
Well, when I applied to be a police officer, I applied to Prince George's County and Prince George's County only because that's the only place I wanted to go. But today's police applicant applies to D.C., Prince George's, Baltimore City, Baltimore County, Anne Arundel, Montgomery, Howard, and whoever gets to them first with things that are attractive to them, pay, incentives, education, etc., that's where they go. They're not necessarily beholden to serve in the jurisdiction where they grew up. They think it through a lot more than we did.
Where the money, where the opportunity is.
Yeah.
What would happen if Prince George's County said, no, when you applied?
What would happen with me?
Where would you be?
I don't know. So I had an English degree with a concentration in writing from Towson. So maybe I have my own podcast.
Yeah, I know, right? I don't know. It's a glamorous profession.
Hey, you can dream. You can dream.
Yeah. No, I don't know. I really don't know. And my great grandfather, DC Fire Chief, my grandfather, DC Fire, my dad, Prince George's Police. So I've got tons of cops and firefighters in my family.
Probably would have gone to a different jurisdiction.
I don't know. I really don't know. I graduated from college and bought a Jeep Wrangler, and I needed to pay for it. So I told my dad I was going to be a cop for a couple of years, and
Ocean City,
while I paid off my
Ralph Stahl, the Beach Weekers.
No, it was right to Prince George. I went right from college right into the police academy. So, and here I am.
No backpacking Europe for you, huh?
No, that wasn't an option.
So, right now, where you are right now, there's a lot of pressure. We were talking about this coming up. We were just saying that whenever you look at the presidential, whenever you're watching Fox News and they're talking about crime in the country, I
don't watch Fox News,
but I'm just talking as part of the national discussion. The conservative side, Baltimore and Chicago are always the two cities that come up when they talk about crime's out of control. Look at Baltimore and Chicago, where the statistics would say maybe, but it's specific areas within those cities for the most part. I mean, you do have citywide,
and there are challenges here that don't exist elsewhere. Right. So I love it when people try to compare Baltimore to Boston and Seattle based on the size of our population, which is absurd.
Which is what we were doing. We were coming up. We were looking at John did the research. And we were looking at the number of police officers, or not police officers, but police departments.
Population size.
What about poverty? What percentage of our
That's what we were saying. You said you can't calculate that into it.
Poverty. 26% of our population lives below the poverty level in Baltimore.
26.
35% of all children in Baltimore live below the poverty level. We have conservatively 25,000 people, our health department tells us, who are addicted to heroin and opioids. And that's been going on a long, long time in Baltimore. It's now hit the white suburbs, so now it's a big deal.
Right.
But it's been going on in Baltimore since
the 60s. It's not happening in Severna Park. Just talk to any parent down there. They'll tell you.
Yeah. and it deserves our attention, but it's been happening in Baltimore since the mid-'60s.
We were listening to, I was on Twitter because I'm a Twitter junkie, and I was looking at,
You follow me?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, good. Thank you.
But it was, it was center, but I look at Fox and CNN and everyone, and it was one of the Fox commentators who said something to the extent of going, now the media suddenly wants to talk about opioids. And I'm like, now? They've been talking about this for a long time.
Yeah.
We're at critical mass now, but it's been for 5-10 years. That's what I've been hearing is that, the opioid epidemic has become the buzz phrase over the last, year and a half.
But I would just say in Baltimore, it's been going on a lot longer than that.
Yeah.
The crack cocaine never surpassed heroin in Baltimore. It's always been heroin, and the fentanyl and the carfentanil and the pills, the oxy. Because
crack never went into. We grew up when crack was in the mid '80s when that was huge and it was taking over the national discourse. Yeah. But it never went to the suburbs. Crack was always in the inner city.
Inner
you translate that
inner beltway.
It was black, and so the white suburbs never really paid attention to it. Other than
what's driving the crime? Baltimore crime is it's high. You've got a big.
Yeah.
A big plate to work with.
So gangs and drug organizations drive the crime, where there's... so
it's gangs and drugs?
Where there's, yes, and guns. And so where there's drugs, there's money. And where there's money, there's guns. And our illegal possession of firearm laws in Maryland are dreadful. It's a misdemeanor to be arrested for illegally carrying a gun in Maryland. And look at other states that have gotten
It's a misdemeanor?
Right. It's a misdemeanor.
I had no clue.
It's always been. Most people don't. So if you're walking down President Street, again, I'm pointing out the window right now,
that I can't see.
You're in illegal possession of a gun. You got a gun stuck in your waistband, and we stop you and arrest you, you're charged with a misdemeanor. If you make that same decision in D.C. or New York, you're charged with a felony, and you're going to go to jail. So we continue to have that conversation throughout the state of Maryland, and Maryland's a microcosm of America.
Is that a law on a state level or city level?
State. Okay. It's state law. So here's the thing about Maryland. For such a small state, we're the microcosm of America. We've got a big city. We've got several big counties, and then we've got the rural Eastern Shore and the rural Western Panhandle and the rural southern part of the state. So the opinions about guns vary in this state, just like they vary across America. And every time I say the word guns, I upset the Second Amendment folks who incorrectly perceive that I'm talking about taking away their ability to legally possess and own a gun. Right. I'm not talking about that at all. If you legally possess a firearm, more power to you. But the fact of the matter is the people who are killing people in Baltimore do not legally possess guns. They illegally possess them, and they illegally carry them, and they do it with such frequency because they know if and when they're caught by the cops, it's a misdemeanor offense, and they will not be going to jail for it.
Now, D.C. has a federal task force there because it's the capital city.
They have the U.S. Attorney's Office prosecutes crime in D.C.
So they have that task force just to get the guns off the streets. And I know that the capital. That was my question.
Yeah, everybody has that.
Gotcha.
But the thing about being, there is no state's attorney's office in D.C. The United States Attorney's Office prosecutes crime in D.C. So in essence, in D.C., every crime is a federal offense.
Oh,
yeah. So that's what allows them to seek greater consequences for lawbreakers in D.C. compared to Maryland.
It's amazing how smart some of these criminals are. Like you say, they know that nothing's going to happen to them if they carry an illegal firearm down here. Nothing.
Well, you have to be Mensa to figure that out.
For the longest time, I had heard that a lot of people were coming into Anne Arundel County to do crimes across from Prince George's County because they knew that the sentencing was very light, and that's changed a little bit under Wes Adams.
Yeah.
It's come in there, and I don't know how true.
The best part of Wes comes from Prince George's, so I know Wes from his days in Prince George's. But you'll hear things like, and a lot of it is urban legend. You can't prove or disprove it, that some criminals will go to other jurisdictions because either it's A, easier to commit the crime, or B, less of a consequence if they get caught. So that argument can go either way.
Right.
And I've heard it all, but I think most criminals commit crime in the neighborhoods where they live.
Well, and the common wisdom, and this is what we've been told when we interviewed both the chiefs of police in Annapolis, and we were talking about the gang problems in the public housing down there, and not the gang, but the drug problems, that the common wisdom is that it's almost like commuters, where you have the gangs and the drugs are coming from D.C. and Baltimore, and they're commuting to Annapolis and setting up shop there with like local vendors, if you will.
Yeah.
And then at night they're going out because we're in between the two. So, that's where we're getting the opioids.
That's relatively accurate, a little bit simplified, but it's
I'm
accurate.
not that bright. So
no, neither am I. But, the heroin comes to Baltimore now directly from Mexico. It used to arrive in Baltimore after it made its way through New York. So
wait, explain that to me.
So the heroin connections, the kilograms of heroin that make their way to the streets of Baltimore, it's a direct connection to Mexico. The cartels and drug organizations.
So they're not coming to, because I always knew that like Pittsburgh was a huge hub because that was the gateway to the Midwest and to the South. So like everything would come out of New York, go to Pittsburgh, and then boom,
it's different.
But now it's
a direct.
It's like an Amazon.com model.
It's reduced the
you get 2-day delivery. It's
reduced the price of kilos, but right now a drug dealer is paying about $55,000 for a kilo of pure heroin.
Wow.
And when I say drug dealer, I'm talking about an upper level drug dealer.
Sure.
Versus fentanyl and carfentanil, $3,500 a kilo. So if you're from a business perspective and you say that some of these guys are smart, and they absolutely are smart, I can spend $55,000 on a kilo of heroin or $3,500 on several kilos of fentanyl or carfentanil. And that is the deadly concoction on the street right now that's killing people. Our overdoses are through the roof. And they all those surrounding jurisdictions, while they are definitely having
how many overdoses do you have this year? Do you know?
We had over 800 last year, and we're going to blow that out of the water this year. So 600, 700 so far this year. Fatal.
So those don't include the ones
that's heroin, carfentanil, fentanyl, any kind of opioid type.
Yep. So again, it is great that the counties are talking about it, but their overdose rate, fatal and non-fatal, pales in comparison to what's going on in the city.
Right. Well, I know that Baltimore City, Baltimore County, and then Anne Arundel, top jurisdictions.
That's the top three right there.
Yeah.
Top three. And we stood up a full-time opioid overdose task force that works out of our homicide section. And all they do is, and they're about to be really, really successful with some of these drug dealers. The last, this is a little quiz, Tim. So, because let's do this. I know you went to good counsel, so you're probably at least a B student.
Uh-huh.
The last telephone number in the cell phone of a person who overdoses on heroin or opioids is whose cell phone number?
All right, hold on. Last phone number to the person to get.
His drug dealer's cell phone number.
You kidding? Oh, what did you give me?
Right. To arrange that transaction. So typically
Oh, I thought you meant like as they were dying. I was going with they're calling their mom or something.
No. So there are, and I'm giving that up to any drug dealers who are listening to your podcast.
Oh, so that's the first place you go is right to the phone. And
absolutely. So we are in the process of identifying those fatal overdose clusters.
So we go back to beepers.
So, well, where there's a will, there's a way. But we are going to identify and criminally charge drug dealers because they are intentionally distributing death and destruction with fentanyl, carfentanil.
Wes Adams just brought charges against somebody, the first one in Anne Arundel County couple weeks ago.
Yeah, that has to be done. They've got to minimally be charged with manslaughter, second-degree murder. And, that's the message we have to send to the drug dealers. Now, the message we have to send to the drug addicts is that we need to treat your addiction and not incarcerate you because of your addiction. So I'm kind of bipolar on this. I want to throw the drug dealers in jail and hold them accountable, but the drug addicts, they need treatment.
They need the help.
Yep. And we have a law enforcement assisted diversion program in Baltimore, one of only 5 or 6 departments in the country to do this. So we have health professionals that ride around with our police officers in this district that we're in right now, the Central District, because that's where we have our greatest number of, or a very large number of drug addicted folks. And if you're in misdemeanor possession of narcotics, we give you a choice, door A or door B. Door A is arrest. Door B is immediate treatment. And they've all chosen immediate treatment. And we're hopeful that that's going to continue to catch on. That started in Seattle.
We have the Safe Stations program in Anne Arundel County. So you have the, what is it, Narcan?
Narcan, yeah.
So
I started that.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah, I don't like to pat myself on the back.
Go ahead, pat us.
We do it all the time.
First police department in Maryland to adopt Narcan was Anne Arundel when I was there. Really proud of that. And there were some naysayers within the organization and within government and within society.
Well, it was never done that way.
Yeah, it was never done that way. And shockingly, and to hear this from police officers and leaders is, why would you treat someone addicted to drugs? Why would you want to save a drug addict from dying on an overdose? And to me, I don't even have a response to that.
We were talking about that with Steve Shue. We said that there's a sheriff over in Ohio who's refusing to have his officers carry the Narcan. Because he says it's personal responsibility.
Yeah, well, he should be thrown out of office.
In Ohio, which, by the way, that's ground zero when you leave the Midwest.
I mean, I get that you take the drug and that's a choice. The first time you take it, I would say you take it as a choice, but then it's got the addictive properties.
It's absolutely an addiction.
And then that you do need help. I agree with that. I mean, I had knee surgery, got prescribed out the yin yang for all sorts of things. I never took anything. I know Wes Adams, the story he tells when he's coming out of the hospital with his back surgery, he says, they gave me all sorts of, drugs. And he says, by the way, it might make you constipated. Nothing about that.
Right. These doctors and the overprescription of Oxy over the years. There was a great piece on 60 Minutes a week or two ago.
Yeah, it was good.
Yes.
Do you see that? That was incredible. There are a lot of people that are complicit in the where we are right now.
Well, we know you have to go out and fight crime. And I see your nightstick and everything, but this was awesome. This was absolutely fantastic. So
I'll come down to Annapolis.
Come back and slum it with us a little bit. We'll
this could be a 4-hour.
We were guest bartenders the other day, and
were you?
Yeah, and
the Lighthouse Shelter.
The Lighthouse Shelter down, and then
they've got a bistro down there now.
Okay,
which is they take the people from the Lighthouse, transition them into a job serving food, cooking.
That's awesome.
And everything else. And they've got transitional housing above it. So once they don't have to do the drug testing and everything else, they can live there for a little bit and pay a little bit of rent.
That's great.
And then move out. But it's really cool.
And Chief Baker, he swung by to make a donation and everything. He wouldn't drink with us, but he wouldn't let me hold his gun either.
I'll have a beer with you. You can't hold my gun. But I will give you a challenge coin.
We got more coins.
Yeah.
I love it. We got a collection going right now. Yeah, because we got one from Peter French Show. And then we got another one from who gave us the other coin?
I don't know.
I got two.
Look at my windowsill.
I know.
We were looking at him earlier.
I was going to look at him, but your guy was watching us a little bit closely.
He's
so I was
keeping an eye on you.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. But this is awesome. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen.
And this is great. Thanks for having us.
Thanks,
Commissioner Kevin Davis, Commissioner, Baltimore City Police Department, high atop 601
East Fayette Street.
Downtown
Baltimore.
East Fayette Street in Baltimore. Thank you for inviting us in.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Let's get some lunch.
And a huge thank you to Commissioner Kevin Davis for, all that time. And then we hung out on his balcony afterwards and saw the shot tower. And
he's very proud of that view.
I'd be proud of it, too.
Yeah.
I'd be proud of it, too. I mean, he had his DeMatha football. What was it DeMatha football? The brick that was out there.
What's the coach name? The DeMatha coach?
I don't know.
No, he had that. He's very proud of that.
I don't know. That's PG County. That's really, Montana to me. Oh, Prince George's County. Sorry, Mr. Baker.
Isn't DeMatha right over the line? Or is that in the district?
I don't know. But Commissioner Kevin Davis, some really good insight. And you know what's kind of very interesting? And we talked a little bit about how crime is increasing in Baltimore. And he was very blatant about, you never know whether you've got a job when you come in the morning when you're an appointed guy. But he's obviously doing something really well for the city, despite the crime increase. Because you've got a guy that came in under Anthony Batt as a deputy commissioner, was hired under Stephanie Rollins Blake, was appointed as an interim temporary commissioner when they fired Anthony Batt, was ultimately made into the permanent commissioner under Stephanie Rollins Blake, survived an election, a new mayor, and was totally reappointed again by the new mayor.
Yeah, he's been there since 2015, so he's been there a couple of years. And you're right, that's a dangerous position if you are worried about job security, because if they're under a lot of pressure right now. I think, what was I just reading to you about which counselor was it?
Brandon Scott.
Yeah, Brandon Scott. He wanted to see a couple of days ago, or the day before Halloween, he said he wanted to see all the city
demanding a
meeting with the city leaders to see what they're doing about crime. Because I guess crime, murders are up 12%, violent crime up 14%, and there is a problem. And, the commissioners acknowledge that. And, how do you solve that? But I mean, if you are an elected official and you're under a lot of pressure, the thing that you can do to show that you're working on the problem is to roll appointees under the bus and then bring someone in. We saw that happen here with
Mike
Pantelides
and
Baker.
Chief
Yeah. And I'm not saying that's why he did it. I mean, it's the prerogative of an elected official or the mayor to bring his own people in or what have you.
It's one of the dangers of taking an appointed position.
But in all honesty, when we were talking to him, it wasn't bravado. Kevin was pretty much like, I don't care. I could be gone tomorrow. And he honestly didn't look like he cared. I mean, because he's there to do a job.
Yeah. I mean, and we don't say didn't care like he doesn't care, but I mean, he understands. He understands the rules of the game.
I don't think he loses sleep over the potential of losing your job, because if you're worrying about that, then you're not concentrating on the task at hand.
Didn't he say that he had planned to retire from PG County when he left there? So, and then Anne Arundel County came, and then this opportunity came. So, I mean, he is, I don't say it's time for him to retire, but I mean, he certainly could. And he's had a great storied career. And it's funny. I think the museum would be a little bit daunting for him because they've got all the police commissioners' portraits on the wall.
Right.
And I was looking at their tenure, and I had to go back to the 80s until somebody had like a 4-year tenure.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's that kind of you're under a lot of pressure. And like I said, when we sat down with them, was whenever you see anyone talking about crime increase in the country or the murder increase, and it's only 5 cities where this is occurring, but Baltimore and Chicago are the 2 that are invariably pointed out.
Well, the thing that stuck out with me in the discussion with him was when he was talking about how the increase in the chaplains in the department, as well as the psychological counseling, which is now mandatory on shootings, And, I've always heard that typical cop will rarely to never shoot his gun.
Right.
Infrequently pull his gun. But Commissioner Davis was saying that, there are cops that are in certain districts and certain precincts that they're doing this day in, day out. There's shootings, and it wears on them.
Like I said, I have friends who are cops, and they'll tell me the stories, and they'll say it kind of with a gallows humor, like, that they're telling me horrible things, and they're kind of joking about it. I'm thinking that's such a defense mechanism. But they're seeing, I'm not just talking about the dramatic things, like, hostages and robberies and muggings and sexual assaults, but I'm talking about domestic violence and child abuse and things that you see on a regular basis, and they see this day in and day out. They really do, and how do you deal with that? And they deal with it by joking. And he said, self-medication.
There's a word. Compartmentalization. Yeah, I was having a tough time with that word.
But I think you can only do that for so long. You can only compartmentalize, for.
See, it is a tough word.
Well, but I still did it. I powered through. But anyway, it was a great talk with him.
Like to go back.
Yep. So in the meantime, of course, you can follow us on Facebook. We have a page and we have a group. You can follow us on Twitter at MD Krabs Podcast. You can follow John at Annapolis. You can follow me at Tim Hamilton 47. We have a YouTube page where you can listen to the podcast, but we would prefer that you go to Apple Podcasts or to Google Play and you subscribe, because once you subscribe, we have all of our stuff delivered to you automatically.
That's right. And while you're there, check out the Ion Annapolis Daily News Brief, Monday to Friday. Goes out at noon. It's local news to Annapolis and Anne Arundel County.
It's good. You're getting better at it.
10 minutes, about 10 minutes every day. And I'm having fun doing it. So that's good. Hey, so what do you have planned for the podcast next week, Tim?
We're going to do some election stuff. We're going to wing it. We do not have a plan yet.
The best kind of plan. Okay.
We deserve it, though. We've put a lot of work into this. You put a ton of work into this. And so we deserve 1 week where we kind of just fake it. So when we're letting you know that we're going to fake it. So no surprises. So next week's podcast may be awesome or it may suck, but you're not paying for it, so we don't care.
And just have to tune in for that. We'll see you next week.
Next week.
This has been the Maryland Krabs Podcast with Tim Hamilton and John Fernay. Sure to follow them in all the regular places, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and online at themarylandkrabs.com. Take a moment to rate us on iTunes. Now, get the hell out of my kitchen. Seriously, go!
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.